Yeah, so it was on a frontage road along the highway. So like I got to ride out there and never have to wait in traffic lights or other traffic. So it was cool. It was like I get to ride my bike, and sometimes I have like 2 classes a day out there. So I go out there, boom, then I ride back, and then I get to ride out again. It was cool. I was starting to lose weight. Um, and So I was doing that for 4 months. I was doing that. And so I would do my classes, and then I'd go home and I'd work on the house. And so I eventually got all of the trash out, and then and then I cut all the trees down because it was like a jungle back there. And then my wife said, "Oh yeah, I want you to pave the whole area, because like we had this area, there's this wall between where they parked the cars and then her house, because my wife had a house made out of toothpicks and cardboard with corrugated iron on the top." And then there's this area of grass, maybe as wide as like this room. But it was all dirt and muddy, so like when it rained, it got all muddy. So like she had me pave that whole area. And then I also got these bags of cement to plug in all the walls in the house, because when people build houses there, at least in that part of Santiago, they like to cut corners financially, and then so instead of using 2 parts sand to 1 part cement, they'd use like 5 part sand to 1 part cement, which made it so that it would just crumble apart, like you scratch at the house in between the bricks, and it would basically be just like sand pouring out at you. So there was all these holes, like 6 inches deep holes, and like bricks falling out and stuff, and there's lots of places where bricks were totally falling out. And this is like an old house anyways. Plus their wall was like bent over and about to fall down. And it was actually missing a bunch of bricks. Like 3 foot section of bricks came down and was just... So anyway, I bought like 50, 100-pound bags of cement. And like I went over to another one. I was like friends with all the people at these 2 different hardware stores, because I was always going in there. And I had them bring me in like 3 separate occasions, like 6 foot high piles of sand they'd come over and dump in there, and then I'd make up the cement and fill in all the patches with proper cement, 2 to 1 ratio. And then I went and bought maybe 60 bags worth of these big bags of like water-based paint. And so water-based paint works great there because it never rains. It only rains in the month of like April there. And then the rest of the year it's totally dry, and it's not windy or anything. Like the weather in Santiago is great. It's not too cold in the wintertime. Never gets so cold that you're going to need like a jacket, more than like a small jacket, you know. And in the summer it never gets so hot that you're like sweating your ass off. It's just perfect. It's not too humid. It's more humid than like Colorado, but it's not too humid. It's just perfect weather. But anyways, yeah, so, and then they had some guy, one of the guys, they have a neighbor guy who was actually... There's like these 3 brothers who live with their mother, and they live 3 houses over. And they, I guess these guys' jobs they were the guys, like we live 3 blocks from the ghetto. It's called the Poblacion, where there's a road even called Social Justice Road. It was where like poor people live, where you can buy houses for like $15,000 or something. But the mortgage is only like $10 or $15 a month. But my wife said that 75% of the people who live there were actually thieves, the kinds of people who would go out to the market and steal from people. And so I guess the neighbor guys here were the guys who would like buy the stuff that other people would sell and then sell it to other people, because they were always selling all kinds of weird stuff and hanging out in the street all day long. But like he also built this house for them, my wife's family, right on the other side of the driveway that goes in. Because they wanted to use that as a building to sell hot dogs, have like a hot dog stand. But he built up the walls and put the roof on, but he didn't put the walls between the roof and the house. So there was this big hole about this high all the way around the house, and there was still a dirt floor until he stopped, because I guess they didn't have the money to have him finish it. But so that was kind of, I think that happened though when I was in America, because what happened was I was there 4 months working on the house, fixing up the house, I also finished the wall that went down. But anyways, oh yeah, and I took like 12 huge paint barrels worth of rocks out of the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street, because it was all covered with rocks and like stuff, because I thought I wanted to like plant plants there, and I did put some trees there, but one of the trees was uprooted by somebody and a plant was, so I don't know how realistic that would have been, but and I painted the house, but then some street kid did some big graffiti thing on the house. I guess if you see a house that doesn't have any graffiti, you have to put your graffiti on it. Kind of sucked. But I guess my wife's brother did the same thing. He actually got arrested for painting some graffiti on somebody's house and had to go to jail for a couple days. But anyways, yeah, my wife's dad, he like goes to jail for 2 months, and so I spend that time getting rid of the trash and painting. And then he comes back one day. He gets let out of jail, but he still has a restraining order against him. So he comes back and he wants to like come in the house, even though he knows he's not supposed to. So he's out there like throwing big rocks like this big at the gate, and he almost busted the door in. It was totally bent in. And he's like, naming all of his kids, you, get me in, help, you. And then he kind of like whimpered and then like gave up, and then the cops came like 5 minutes later and took him off to jail. So he was in jail for like another couple of months. And then when he got out of jail the second time, he didn't come over. So he wasn't living there for like a year. But for a while he was, I guess, attached to the neighborhood. So he was still living in the neighborhood, just in the street. Like one day somebody came by and said, oh yeah, your dad, he's like sleeping in the sidewalk. So we went over there and he was like passed out from being drunk in the bushes, kind of in the shade there, and all these people gathered around watching him. So like we picked him up, and like she called her brother, and he came with his car and drove him over to his mother's house, and where he lived with him. But I guess they had problems because he was like, I don't know. Oh, but he also had a mistress with like a couple of kids by her. So I guess he was living with her too, who lived like in a suburb of Santiago. I guess he had lots of mistresses. I guess when he was younger, when my wife was a little kid, he had like a girl. He was like his mistress. He was doing it with some lady who had a husband, and the husband got really pissed off at him and bashed his brains in with a baseball bat, and he was in a coma for like 3 months. So his brother took over, and he had like a really thriving automobile mechanic shop at the time with like 6 employees, and was doing really well. But her brother came over and embezzled all the money and screwed up the place, and ever since then he never recovered. And I guess they put a big metal plate in his head to fix his skull, and ever since then he was kind of like brain damaged and couldn't think straightly, and that's why he got into alcohol and he was definitely not really there. He's like the craziest guy I've ever met in my life. He didn't even know my name for like 3 years. He called me the gringo. And I remember when they taught him how to work a cell phone. He didn't even know what a cell phone was, and he was just crazy. He liked to get drunk and like sing and stuff, and but sing really loud. So he was banned from all of the restaurants and bars in the entire neighborhood because he'd scare people off. And I guess one time when I was there, he did that. And I guess somebody asked him to leave, but sometimes he gets really violent. And so I guess they got pissed off at him and they beat him up. So because he came home one day and he's like covered in like purple puffy face and like black eye and broken nose and all this stuff. Well, not a broken nose, but so we took photos of him, and I guess he was going to sue him or something until he realized he couldn't do that. So then to get revenge, he went back to that restaurant with a Molotov cocktail and threw it on the roof to like burn it down, but it like rolled back and landed on his feet and exploded in front of him and like caught him on fire. So that didn't really work out. But But